Hi there, I'm Jamie McCarthy Fisher. I'm the Managing Director of Wild Goose Studio. We're based in Kinsale in County Cork, Ireland.
Okay, hi Jamie. Thank you very much for giving me some of your time today to talk about Wild Goose Studio. Now, the obvious place to start is, what is Wild Goose Studio
Yes,
and what do you do here?
and why Wild Goose Studio probably as well.
That's probably a
Yeah.
more interesting question.
So Wild Goose Studio, we've been around for since 1970. So it's a family business based in Kinsale in County Cork in Ireland. We are a company who started out making artifacts, making facsimiles of the heritage of Ireland, so the built heritage of Ireland, so the high crosses, the carvings, New Grange, that sort of thing. And very much we're trying to make historically accurate pieces which would reflect the history and the heritage of Ireland. That was back in sort of 1970, the early days of Irish tourism, and we evolved over time to do slightly different things. Now, we always worked in cold cast bronze. So we're not using hot metals, we're using bronze powders, and we're using a ceramic resin as the backing for that. Each piece starts as a carving, which will either could be done in stone, it could be done in clay, it could be done in wood, it could be done in plaster. And we've evolved over time away from those origins towards thinking about what these pieces meant then, but what they mean now as well. So trying to put an interpretation on them that would make them relevant to people now. So things have slightly got a bit looser. We're not just doing, this was a high cross that was in the 11th century in Clonmacnoise. We've moved a little bit on from that to say, well, this is what this might mean. What are the patterns here? What are they talking about? What are they aiming towards? And trying to give people a reason why they might want to have that in their house now.
Okay, so that gives you a really interesting kind of move from past to present,
Mm.
basically. So that shift, was that in combined with a shift away from tourism, or is that actually to keep in line with the tourism that you mentioned earlier?
I think what it was is that so the company was started by my father-in-law, who died a number of years ago now, and a friend of his, Kathleen, who was an artist. So he was a psychotherapist. He was interested in Jung. He was interested in symbolism.
Okay.
So he started to think about what things might mean, and working with Kathleen, they would kind of there was a kind of symbiotic relationship there where they would come up with ideas and then find images that would match them. And Kathleen was very, very good at interpreting the old pieces and giving them new life.
Okay. And then to tie that into something else that
Mm.
you said, obviously about the cold casting and everything
Yeah.
starting from a carving.
Yeah.
Is that very much something that was what you used to do? It's still what you do today. And is that
Yeah.
about retaining heritage or just continuing what you've always done?
Well, I think so it was very much a cottage industry at the beginning, very much kind of trying things out, experimenting, garden shed, kitchen table. And they went through various materials to try and come up with something which would mold easily. So we use silicon rubber molds. Went from the original carving, we can make a masterpiece from that. And then we can make molds from the masterpiece. And then we can use the molds to make very faithful reproductions of the original carving. Um, I think why we haven't moved on from that is because it's a very simple and very effective process. It's I know my father-in-law used to talk about it being like pouring a cup of tea in a way, because you are putting the metal powder into the mold, and then you're pouring in the resin, and then it hardens, and then you can polish it from there. So it's a simple process, and I think that was the attraction then, and it's the attraction now. It gives us a very faithful reproduction of what we're looking for.
Amazing. So that gives you, like you say, faithful, which is
Mm,
really important,
mm.
simple, but by all means, you've obviously got to have a high level of skill to be able to do this.
Yeah, yeah,
So I suppose, tell me about the team, the people that
sure.
work here. What do they do,
Okay,
and
so
how good are they?
I guess so. There are different stages of the skills that come in, and I guess the starting point would always be the original carving, and that's where the really hard work and the really skilled work comes in. And these would be artists over time. We've used different people. So there was Kathleen from the outset. She would do work. We'd always worked with outside artists as well because they could offer us something slightly different. So we've worked with stone carvers over the years. We've worked with visual, I mean, with painters actually as well. And so various people we brought in, and they've brought their skills in. But the where it goes from there is to the carving, and the carving, even if we've worked with a painter who's come up with an image for us, the how that image becomes a carving is really where the skill lies. Um, After that, the skill is then in being very precise with the casting of the piece, but then after that, it's the polishing of the piece. So the it's quite a hard process actually polishing bronze to bring it into a really nice shine without wearing it through or without leaving it looking a bit dull. So that's very skilled work as well.
So it's kind of, am I accurate in saying that it's kind of three key processes that you've
Mm,
got? So that
mm,
you've got the casting, the
mhm.
polishing, and then to start with, it's all
From the original
from the
carving.
original
Yeah,
carving.
exactly. Yeah.
Excellent.
And then nowadays, quite a lot of what we do would be framed as well. So that there's a sort of final element there where the pieces get framed. So there's various stages along the way in the process.
So something that you touched on there that I think could be really interesting is this idea of collaborations.
Mm,
You've done collaborations with artists, you say, and how you've brought those to life.
mhm.
How do those come about, and how important are they to the studio?
So often what would happen is we'd start with an idea. So that might be, it could even be a line of poetry. It could be um, a thought of, something that we're wanting to look at. Because I guess one of the things that we do in Wild Goose is we would always try and marry an image with a thought or an idea. So all our pieces would have titles. They'd all have some kind of description on the back of them as well to give people an idea of what we're actually trying to convey with the image. So we might start with that idea, and then once once we have that, we'll have a basic idea of what we think that might look like, and then we will go to an artist and commission them for the work. So
Okay.
it works that way, and then they might draw something, and then there may be a little process involved there where we're kind of, yeah, that's not quite what we had in mind, or um, that's one way. Other ways, obviously, is where there is a really nice carving which exists already, and we feel that that would work well with an existing idea that we have, and then we put those two together. And so we might literally go to an artist and say, well, look, this particular high cross or this carving on a high cross, we'd like you to do that and reproduce that for us. And it's always it's a reproduction, but there's always an interpretation in there as well. So that's how we would do it.
That makes perfect sense. And then is there any kind of, I suppose, collaborations over the years that have really stood out to you that like have really kind of impacted the studio or something like
Yeah,
that?
I mean, we worked, and early on we worked with a sculptor called Oisin Kelly, who would be at the time this would have been in the early 70s, I suppose. He was an eminent sculptor at the time, and he did some work with us, and some of the pieces that he made back then still sell now, which is really nice.
Wow.
We worked with a Cork sculptor called Ken Thompson, who made some really important pieces for us in the 90s and early part of this century, which did really good things for us, and particularly in America. There were some pieces which he carved for us, and he's a stone carver, so he made beautiful work for us. More recently, we work within the studio with Adam, who's our main carver and designer here. And if we're looking outside, we did something a little bit unusual a few years ago, where we worked with NCAD, the National College of Art and Design in Dublin, and we actually went to their print department because we were interested in. Some of the pieces we have are based on words, and we wanted them to come up with some ideas for some products which might come from a slightly different angle than we would normally look at. And it was a really interesting project for us, and there are about 8 students who worked on it, and out of those, 2 of them actually came up with ideas that we thought were really good, and it took us a while to translate their ideas, which looked really good on paper, but maybe we hadn't thought through the practical side of them as well, and they hadn't, but that wasn't their remit. They were tasked with coming up with ideas. And so it's taken us quite a long time, but actually later in this year, we will have 2 new product ranges coming out, which are based on the ideas that they came up with during that process. So it took a while, but we got there in the end.
Sometimes it's worth it though, that extra time.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's amazing that they got to be involved like that as students. And I suppose that leads to a good point about, you've got Adam, you mentioned him a couple of times here. How does somebody come to get into this? Like, this it seems so small and so niche.
It's quite niche.
How do you get if I'm hoping there's a few people watching this who are kind of looking to maybe move into this space. How would they do that?
It is quite challenging. I mean, we are quite niche, and so Adam came to work for us probably getting on for 20 years ago now, and he just discovered he had a talent for carving, and he came to me and he said, I want to make something. He was going to get engaged, and he wanted to make a little box which he could put the ring into, and it was going to have a cladder on it. And I kind of went, okay, well, take some clay and go and do what you can. And he came back and he created this thing which was really good, and we were all kind of going, oh wow, that's amazing. Who knew Adam could do that? And Kathleen, who was our original artist, was still alive then and still active in the studio. She actually then started working with him to train him. So and she eventually passed on her tools to him, her carving tools. So he still uses the tools that she used to use.
That's amazing.
So it is quite niche. is the answer there. There's a kind of very direct line that comes. And I mean, other people we've had, if there's someone who's working in clay is quite a good material for us, because the sort of plasticity of clay and the softness of it works really well with some of what we do.
So you're absolutely right. This is obviously very niche, with this very direct, even tools being passed across. So do you have concerns about maybe keeping this skill or this I suppose it's skill alive? Is this something, how do you keep this going?
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, I am kind of coming to the latter end of my time here for sure. And one of the things that does occupy me is, how do I leave it in a way that is sustainable from lots of different ways, but particularly in how do we keep going with the skills? How do we keep that working? And I kind of believe quite a lot in serendipity with Adam. It just happened. I do. We have worked with people who, have trained as sculptors. So there is sculpting is very much part of what we do. So that would be where I'd be going to look for resources if I, what I would. That's where I'd be suggesting we look in the future is into the sculpting world. Um, it is a concern though. There's no doubt about it because we are quite niche. We're quite narrow in what we do. There are other companies around which do similar things in Ireland, but not that many.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like I've obviously been looking at this before coming to speak to you.
Yeah.
And yes, there are not very many
not very
at
many.
all.
Yes. Yeah.
But if we were to take, obviously, so that's like you and immediately the skills and tools that you guys have here. If we kind of look at a slightly bigger picture,
Yeah.
are you concerned at all by the advent of AI and the increased use of social media? Now, to me, this feels like something that maybe shouldn't be affected by that, but do you feel like it's things that you would be concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, I think in any business, you're always reacting to what's happening, particularly in the world of technology. I remember one of our the biggest customer we've ever had was a mail order catalog in America in the late 90s. And they were huge, and we were doing enormous business with them. And obviously, about 3 years later, internet online sales took over and mail order catalogs pretty much disappeared.
Yeah.
And so we went from having this fabulous customer there. I mean, what it did for their business obviously was even worse than what it did for us.
Yeah,
but,
of course.
But we had to adapt then, and that was technology taking away something that we had, and we adapted. And I think there is a worry there for us in AI. That I mean, I've been looking at 3D printing for a while and kind of wondering when that's going to come into affect us, and it hasn't yet. And so I wonder whether we're slightly insulated because of the artistic element that's involved here, and that's something that's not that easily replicated. And yeah, there is a worry. We've looked a little bit at AI as well, just to make sure that we know what's going on. At the moment, I don't think it's affecting us. I'm more worried about what's happening in, the wider world of the Middle East and all of that. So, that's what's in front of me. At the
That's a
moment.
more immediate problem that is
Absolutely,
probably immediately impacting
Definitely.
your ability to get resources to send. I'm assuming you send around the world.
We do. Yeah.
So
That's all become a lot more complicated just in the last year. I mean, a big chunk of our market would be in America. So we've been struggling with, the tariffs and all of that,
of course.
since, we were getting by up until August on the de minimis. We were sort of going in underneath that, and that was fine. So we were duty free until the beginning of August, and then that all changed in the beginning of September, and it's been pretty bumpy. So we would have two markets within America. We'd have our online customers, and then we would have shops. We sell into shops there as well. So yeah, it's been tough going, and doesn't look like it's going to get any less tough in the immediate future. We've always had several parts to our business, and it's been deliberate, I suppose, so like I said, we started out with tourists in Ireland. We reasonably quickly started exporting, and around about 2000, we actually diversified quite a lot and created quite a lot of products for domestic customers as well. So we kind of, usually what happens is if the tourism market isn't doing so well, one of the other markets will be doing fine, and so everything kind of balances out. So that's sort of how we've looked at it. We obviously do sell online. We were slow into it because we always felt that we were wholesalers, not retailers. COVID put paid to that pretty quickly, and we fairly swiftly developed our online platform after that, and we do a bit of social media. We do yeah, so we're kind of much more involved in that. We're not so scared of upsetting our retail customers as we used to be.
Yeah.
They all accept that everyone is online as well.
So you've been, like, as a company, been doing this since the 70s. So this idea of multiple revenue streams and being able to diversify, you must have done something right to still be
I guess so,
to still be going.
Yeah.
And just to touch back on social media there for a second, I'm assuming, again, with what you do and the customers that you have,
Yeah.
do you generally see this as something that can be beneficial, or is it problematic to just have to focus energy and attention on social media?
I think it's been really good for us. We were always a very much, and we probably still are in a way, we were always a kind of under the radar company. We weren't that interested in marketing. We weren't that interested in advertising in a traditional sense. We always felt, well, we supply the products to the shops. We'll look after the shops, and the shops will
They'll
look
do the
after us.
marketing, yeah.
So that was always what our strategy was, and it's only really changed since we decided that we needed to sell online, and really the only way to do that was through social media.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, so we are active there.
So we've spoken a good bit there about what you do with the modern age. How do you take on all of that and still retain the history and the heritage and what makes you Wild Goose all the way back from the 70s? Like, how do you balance the history and tradition with the modern way of doing these things?
Sure.
How do you manage to do that?
Well, I guess part of that is in the materials that we use. So we are known for bronze, and obviously bronze has a huge heritage here, and and in many places, but there's a particular heritage involved in bronze in Ireland. So it's interesting, when we've tried different materials over the years, we brought out a range of products which were carved in wood instead of using the bronze, and I was very excited about it, and just didn't work. And part of that, I think, is because people didn't recognize it as something that we do.
Yeah.
So there's the heritage involved in the materials. So that's definitely there. Also, I think what we try and do to retain that heritage is we hold on to that idea of an idea and an image, and those two things. If you like, they're the DNA of Wild Goose Studio. It's come up with an idea. How can we make it? What can we make it look like? And how can we put those two things together? So a few years ago, we did a project with an artist where we were interested in a product which would be a modern interpretation of knotwork.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So we wanted to have a product which was to do with marriage and weddings or engagements, people coming together. And so knotwork obviously is, there's a huge history to it, but it is very, it's very particular, and not necessarily something that someone getting married now would want to have in their house. So we wanted something which spoke to that tradition, but did it in a new way. So she was tasked with doing that, and she came up with something which was really good for that. So that's, I guess, how we do it. We try and look at, well, what are the things, what are the important parts of what we do? How do we do them differently now?
Amazing. So in my head at least, you've built these pillars of, this is what we are, this is what Wild Goose Studio is, and then you can use those in whichever way you need, but the foundation is still the same. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Amazing. I love that. I think that's really great, and I think maybe leads us to what probably is our final question. Your building these pillars, you have your foundation. What do you do going forwards? What's next for Wild Goose
Well, I
Studio?
guess there are several things that I think about. I mean, immediately in front of us are the two product ranges which we worked with the NCAD students. So one of those looked at the old Irish pennies and the font that was on the old Irish pennies. So we took that font and we're using that font on some new products, and they're round products to as a
Yeah, you can visually see
memory,
one to the other.
a memory of the penny there, and so that's immediately in front of us as those two new ranges coming out later this year. As to further ahead, one of the things that I think about a lot is materials, because bronze is obviously something which is mined out of the ground. It's a commodity. Resin is something which is a petrochemical. So there are things. These are the main issues that I'm focusing on for the future. Is, well, how do we come up with a water-based product? How do we come up with something which has the appearance of what we do now, but doesn't necessarily use the materials that we use now? And that's my, if you like, my holy grail, is to get to that point before I depart.
You make it sound like you're departing, not just leaving here. So that's pushing towards sustainability, basically. Just trying to make what you do more and more sustainable, which probably isn't something that people are maybe considering when they're purchasing from you at the moment.
No,
but could be in
the future.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Amazing.
And a lot of what we do is long lasting. And I think I've seen in people's homes pieces which were made 40, 50 years ago, and they still have them. So it's not that we're a disposable product. It's more that how can we make our pieces long lasting, but with more sustainable materials.
Yeah, how can the process be more sustainable as well?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I suppose with these amazing pieces made by incredible artists with very long lasting and more sustainable processes, people might want to buy those. Where can people find more about you? Where can people pick up your pieces, learn about your Irish heritage? If you can let us all know.
Okay, well, our website, wildgoosestudio.com, has a lot of information on there about our history, the people who've worked here, the artists that we've worked with. There are a few short films about some of the actual products that we've made and what the origin stories of those were. So that's a very good resource, I would say, as a starting point. Other than that, we're in lots and lots of gift shops around this country. So yeah,
definitely check that out. And your store is also on wildgoosestudio.com.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think that's everything for today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.